The arrival. The night sky was calm, filled with thousands of tiny stars. It was just another ordinary night on Earth, until it wasn't. At first, it appeared as a bright dot in the sky, no different from the countless stars above. But it was moving. Fast. Too fast. The dot grew bigger, brighter, and then suddenly stopped. A massive black ship now floated above Earth's orbit, casting a shadow on the planet below. The world noticed immediately. Satellites detected it. Governments panicked. Scientists scrambled for answers. Was it an asteroid? A secret military experiment? Or was it something else? Panic on Earth. In a high-security underground base, a group of world leaders and top scientists gathered around a screen. The spaceship was there, clearly visible, but it did nothing. It just hovered, silent and unmoving. Dr. Ethan Cross, a well-known astrophysicist, stared at the screen, his fingers tapping nervously on the table. "It's waiting for something," he said. "Waiting for what?" someone asked. Ethan didn't know, but something in his gut told him this was no ordinary first contact. Then, without warning, a beam of light shot down from the ship. It was aimed at a remote countryside in North America. The light was blinding, illuminating the dark night like daylight. And then, as quickly as it appeared, the beam vanished. The woman from the light. Silence followed. In the middle of a vast field, the grass still glowed faintly from the strange energy. And then, she appeared. A woman stood there, completely still. She was tall, graceful, and strangely human-like. Her long silver hair shimmered under the moonlight, and her deep violet eyes held a wisdom that did not belong to this world. She wore a suit made of a material Earth had never seen before, smooth, glowing faintly, almost like liquid light. She wasn't human, but she wasn't entirely alien either. A farmer, who had been watching from his house, stepped outside, his hands trembling. "Daliu, who are you?" he whispered. The woman turned to him, her expression unreadable. And then she spoke. Her voice was calm, but it carried a strange power. "I am Leora, and I have come with a proposal. A message for humanity." News spread like wildfire. Within an hour, the military had surrounded the area, helicopters buzzing in the sky. Scientists, soldiers, and government officials rushed to the scene. Ethan Cross was among them. He had spent his entire life dreaming of extraterrestrial contact, but now that it was happening, he felt uneasy. Leora stood in the middle of the chaos, completely calm. She didn't move, didn't react to the soldiers pointing their weapons at her. She simply waited. The President of the United States arrived, flanked by security. "What do you want?" he asked, his voice strong but cautious. Leora looked at him, then at all the humans around her. "Not war," she said. "Not destruction." She paused. "We need your help." A murmur spread through the crowd. The idea was ridiculous. An advanced alien species coming to Earth for help. It didn't make sense. Ethan stepped forward. "Help with what?" Leora's eyes met his, and for the first time, there was something else in her expression. A flicker of something deep, something close to fear. "There is something coming," she said. "Something that not even my people can stop. And if we fail..." She turned her gaze toward the night sky. Earth will be next. The hidden fear. Silence fell. Even the wind seemed to stop. Ethan's heart pounded. He studied her carefully. She wasn't lying. Whatever she was talking about, whatever was coming, it terrified her. And if an advanced alien civilization was scared, what chance did humanity have? The president's voice was steady. "Why should we trust you?" Leora nodded, as if she expected the question. Slowly, she raised her hand, and a holographic projection appeared in the air. It showed something horrifying. A fleet of dark, monstrous ships stretching across space like a storm. Planets burning. Entire civilizations wiped out in an instant, and in the middle of it all, an entity. A shadow with no form, moving like a living nightmare, consuming everything in its path. It was something beyond war, beyond invasion. It was annihilation. Leora turned back to them. "This is the Voidborn." Her voice was quiet, but filled with certainty. "They erase everything. They do not conquer. They do not negotiate. They devour." The hologram faded, leaving only darkness behind. Ethan exhaled slowly, trying to process what he had just seen. This wasn't just about Earth. This was about all life. But there was still one question that no one had asked. Ethan swallowed and looked directly into Leora's eyes. "Why us?" For the first time, the alien woman hesitated. Then she spoke the words that changed everything. "Because you are humanity, and you are different." The proposal. The room was silent, heavy with the weight of uncertainty. The holographic images had faded, but their horror still lingered in the minds of those who had seen them. Entire planets reduced to nothing. Beings, civilizations, wiped out as if they had never existed. Leora stood in the middle of it all, her face unreadable, her silver hair flowing gently in the artificial breeze of the underground command center. She had come with a proposal, but no one dared to speak first. Finally, Dr. Ethan Cross broke the silence. His voice was calm, but beneath it was an edge of urgency. "You say these Voidborn erase everything they touch. If that's true, then how do you know about them? How did you survive?" Leora's violet eyes locked onto his, and for the first time, she looked uncertain. "Because we ran." A murmur spread through the room. Some scoffed, others whispered to each other. The mighty aliens, advanced beyond human comprehension, had fled. The President of the United States, seated at the head of the conference table, leaned forward, his gaze sharp. "You abandoned your own people." Leora exhaled slowly. "We did what we had to do, what every species before us failed to do." Her voice was steady, but there was something hidden beneath it. Guilt? Regret? Ethan wasn't convinced. There was more to this story. "Why come to us?" he pressed. "There must be other civilizations more advanced than humanity." Leora's lips parted as if to answer, but then she hesitated. That single moment of hesitation sent a cold wave through Ethan's spine. She was hiding something, but she recovered quickly. "Your people are unique." Ethan narrowed his eyes. "How?" Leora looked around the room, studying their faces. Then she did something unexpected. She removed her glove. The moment her bare hand touched the surface of the table, a ripple of light spread across it. The air shimmered, and suddenly, the entire room changed. No longer were they in the command center. The walls and ceiling had vanished, replaced by a massive battlefield. It wasn't a recording. It was something more. The people in the room could feel the vibrations in the ground, the cold sting of the alien air, the heat of distant fires. It was like they had been pulled into a memory. Thousands of humanoid figures stood in formation, weapons glowing with alien energy. The Eteri army, tall, graceful, perfect in every way. And yet, they were afraid. Then the Voidborn came. Dark shapes moved through the mist, shifting, twisting, devouring light itself. The Eteri warriors, despite their strength, hesitated. Some turned to flee. Others raised their weapons, but their hands shook. And then, a scream. One by one, the Eteri fell, their bodies vanishing into the darkness as if they had never existed. And all through it, Leora's voice echoed in the minds of those watching. "We are the most advanced civilization of our time. Our technology surpasses yours in every way. We live longer. We think faster. We have cured disease, ended war among ourselves, and conquered the stars." A pulse of energy rippled through the memory. The battlefield faded, and suddenly, they were in a different place, a ruined Eteri city, its sky filled with smoke, its towering spires collapsing into the ground. Leora stood in the center of it all, alone. She looked up, her face drenched in sweat, her expression filled with something none of them had expected to see. Terror. But we are weak. The illusion collapsed, and the room snapped back to reality. The command center's walls returned. The hum of machines filled the silence once more. Everyone was still frozen in place, shaken by what they had just experienced. Lyra flexed her fingers, her skin still glowing faintly from the energy she had used. She looked at Ethan, her expression unreadable. The Atari are powerful, but we do not have what you have. Asterisk, 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 asterisk. We do not have the will to fight when all hope is lost. The words hung in the air like a ghost. The president frowned. Are you saying humans are stronger than you? Leora nodded, slowly, not physically, not technologically, but in a way that matters most. She tapped her temple. In here, you resist. You endure, you survive, even when survival is impossible. She looked at Ethan again, as if searching for something deep within him. You don't even realize what makes you different. Ethan exhaled sharply, running a hand through his hair. His mind was spinning. So let me get this straight, he said. You're asking us to join your war. A war that, by your own words, every other species has lost. Lyra's gaze didn't waver. Yes. The president interjected, his voice laced with skepticism. And what do we get in return? Leora finally smiled. Everything. She stepped forward, raising both hands, and suddenly holographic images filled the room. Blueprints, star maps, advanced energy cores, weapons far beyond human capability, medicine that could cure anything, and something more, a gateway, a passageway to the stars. You will not just be soldiers, Leora said. You will become something greater. You will step beyond your planet, beyond your limitations. You will evolve. Silence filled the room once more. Ethan knew what was coming next. He could see it in the way the officials looked at each other. The temptation was too great. But he also saw something else in Lyora's eyes, a warning. There was something she wasn't saying, and Ethan Cross was going to find out what. The truth unfolds. The world was no longer the same. After Lyora's proposal, the leaders of Earth were thrown into a whirlwind of debates, secret meetings, and desperate calculations. The offer was too tempting: advanced technology, cures for disease, access to interstellar travel. But at what cost? Dr. Ethan Cross sat in his dimly lit office, staring at the holographic projection hovering above his desk. Lyora's words repeated in his mind. You do not realize what makes you different. Ethan wasn't a politician. He wasn't a soldier. He was a scientist, a man who had spent his life searching for truths buried beneath the stars. But now, a terrifying thought gnawed at him. Lyra had come to Earth seeking help. That meant the Atari, for all their advancements, had failed. Which meant humanity had no chance. The hidden data. The knock at his door was sharp, urgent. Ethan looked up to see a woman standing in the doorway. Dr. Evelyn Carter, the leading astrophysicist and one of the few people Ethan actually trusted. She stepped inside, shutting the door behind her. You need to see this, she whispered. Ethan frowned. See what? Wordlessly, Evelyn handed him a tablet. A dark screen, filled with classified Atari data that their scientists had been decoding since Lyora's arrival. Ethan scrolled through it, his heartbeat slowing as he read the hidden reports. He was expecting battle strategies, maybe technological blueprints. What he found was worse. The Atari had not just encountered the Voidborn. They had created them, a mistake that couldn't be undone. Ethan shot out of his chair, the tablet clutched in his shaking hands. This isn't possible. Evelyn's face was pale. It is. The Atari were once at war with another species, a brutal war that lasted centuries. They were losing, so they created a weapon. Ethan swallowed hard, a weapon that turned against them. She nodded. The Voidborn were supposed to be self-replicating enforcers, machines designed to hunt down and destroy enemy civilizations. But something went wrong. They didn't just kill their targets, they absorbed them. Ethan stared at the screen, horrified. They learned. Evelyn's voice dropped lower. They didn't just learn. They evolved. They adapted to every form of resistance. No weapon, no defense could stop them. The Atari realized too late what they had done. And by then, it was over. Ethan's mind raced. That's why they ran. They weren't fighting a war. They were hiding from their own mistake. A long silence filled the room. Then, Evelyn spoke the words Ethan had been afraid of. Leora lied to us. The confrontation. Ethan found Leora in the highest security wing of the base. She stood near a large observation window, watching the vastness of space. Her posture was calm, serene, but Ethan wasn't fooled. She was waiting for him. You read the files, she said without turning. Ethan clenched his fists. You knew. You knew from the start. Leora sighed. It changes nothing. It changes everything. Ethan snapped. You didn't ask for our help. You asked us to clean up your mess. Leora turned to face him, her expression unreadable. It is no longer just our mess. The Voidborn will reach this planet, sooner or later. And when they do, they will consume everything. Ethan glared at her. And how do we know you're not just using us? How do we know you won't leave us behind when things get worse? Leora stepped closer, her violet eyes locking onto his. There was no arrogance in them, only exhaustion, only pain. You don't, she said softly. Ethan exhaled sharply, shaking his head. Then why should we fight for you? Leora hesitated, and for the first time, her mask cracked. Because if you don't, she whispered, then you will be the next ones to run. The unavoidable decision. The next morning, the world leaders gathered for an emergency meeting. Ethan sat in the far corner, listening as the most powerful people on Earth debated the greatest gamble in human history. This isn't our war, one general argued. This is an Atari problem, not a human one. The Voidborn will not stop, Leora reminded them. Your people will die either way. You can fight, or you can be hunted. The president turned to his advisors. If we refuse. Leora was silent for a long time before answering. Then we leave. Murmurs spread through the room. Some with relief, others with fear. Ethan watched Leora carefully. There was something off about her words. She wasn't just saying they would leave. She was warning them. Humanity had been given a choice. But what if it was never a choice at all? Ethan cleared his throat, standing up. The room fell silent as he spoke. Leora, he said, tell me the truth. She looked at him. If we say no, do the Voidborn come sooner? The air in the room froze. Leora didn't answer. She didn't have to. Ethan's stomach dropped. It had been a trap from the start. If humanity refused, the Atari would leave, but they would lead the Voidborn straight to Earth. His hands clenched into fists. They weren't choosing whether or not to fight. They were choosing whether to fight now or fight when it was already too late. He turned to the president, his voice calm but heavy. We don't have a choice. The president looked at him for a long moment. Then he nodded. He turned back to Leora. Then tell us what we have to do. The hidden agenda. The first step to war. The decision had been made. Humanity would fight. The announcement shook the world. People flooded the streets in protest, in panic, in determination. Some demanded war. Others begged their leaders to reconsider. But in the end, the truth was undeniable. There was no way out. The Atari's warning was clear. Fight now or die later. And yet, deep inside the underground military base, where the final decision was made, Dr. Ethan Cross felt the weight of a different truth. This war was never a choice. Leora had known from the beginning. The Atari weren't just looking for allies. They were looking for sacrifices, a glimpse into the void. The first step was understanding the enemy. At the heart of the base, a heavily guarded lab had been constructed overnight. The most advanced Atari technology had been brought in, combined with Earth's own data systems. Scientists, soldiers, and world leaders watched in grim silence as a single image flickered onto the screen. A dark mass, shifting, moving, consuming. The Voidborn. Ethan clenched his fists as he studied the data. He had seen enough alien horrors in his life, but this was different. "This isn't just a species," he murmured. "It's an infection." Leora stood beside him, her arms crossed. They do not conquer. They do not bargain. They do not enslave. They erase. Ethan exhaled sharply. "How do you even fight something like this?" Leora's face remained expressionless. "You don't. You survive." The word sent a shiver down Ethan's spine. Humanity had agreed to fight, but they still didn't know how, or if it was even possible. The secret weapon. Hours later, Ethan sat alone in his quarters, staring at the holographic files Evelyn had sent him. Something wasn't adding up. The Atari were advanced beyond imagination. They had seen entire civilizations fall to the Voidborn. They knew their tactics, their weaknesses, if they even had weaknesses. So why did they come to Earth? Something was missing. A soft knock at the door pulled him from his thoughts. Leora stepped inside, her silver hair shimmering under the dim light. Leora remained silent. "We're not your soldiers. We're your shields." The words felt like acid on his tongue. Leora finally looked away. When she spoke, her voice was quiet. "If we run, they will follow." Ethan exhaled sharply. "And you were hoping that if we fought, they'd stay distracted long enough for you to escape." Leora closed her eyes. She didn't deny it. Ethan turned away, his fists clenched. This wasn't a war. It was a trap. And humanity had walked straight into it. Betrayal and decisions. The next morning, everything changed. A distress signal rang through the base. Every screen flickered to life, showing a single, horrifying image. A fleet of ships, burning. Ethan's heart stopped. "Whose ships are those?" A soldier turned to him, his face pale. "There? Atari." Leora's eyes widened as she stepped forward, her fingers moving rapidly over the control panel. This can't be possible. No Voidborn ships were detected in this sector. But as she zoomed in, the truth became clear. These weren't the Voidborn. They were other Atari. Leora's people. And they were coming to destroy them. The room erupted into chaos. Military officers shouted orders, alarms blared, but Ethan's mind focused on one thing. The Atari weren't just running from the Voidborn. They were running from their own kind. He turned to Leora, his voice sharp. "What did you do?" Leora's lips pressed together. She looked at the screen, her face unreadable. "Not all Atari agreed with my choice." Ethan took a step forward. "And what was that?" Leora's violet eyes flicked toward him. "To use humanity as a weapon." The words cut deeper than a knife. Ethan barely heard the president's voice ordering defensive measures. He barely noticed the panic rising in the command center. All he could think about was the bitter, inescapable truth. Humanity had been forced into a war. And now, they were caught between two enemies. The Voidborn. And the ones who had brought them here. War begins. The betrayal strikes first. The war against the Voidborn was supposed to be humanity's greatest challenge. But no one expected the first enemy attack to come from their so-called allies. The Atari fleet emerged from hyperspace like a storm, sleek silver ships moving with terrifying precision. These were not the desperate, broken survivors who had begged for Earth's help. These were the true warriors of the Atari Empire. And they had come to erase Leora's mistake. Alarms blared through the underground command center. Red warning lights bathed the room in an eerie glow as officers scrambled for answers. The holographic war map in front of them displayed the harsh reality. They weren't just outgunned. They were outclassed. Ethan Cross stood frozen, watching as the Atari fleet surrounded Earth's orbital defenses. He knew the truth now. Leora had gambled on humanity's ability to fight the Voidborn. But her own people, they had other plans. And now, they were here to wipe Earth out before the war even began. The stand at Earth's orbit. The first attack came swift and merciless. Atari disruptor beams sliced through human satellite defenses like paper, sending debris raining down through the upper atmosphere. Space stations erupted into fireballs, their fragments burning against the black void. Defense systems are failing, a technician shouted. We're losing the upper grid. Ethan turned to the president, his voice sharp. We need to talk to them. Now. But Leora was already moving. She strode toward the central console, her fingers flashing over the alien interface. Within seconds, a communication link opened, displaying a cold, armored figure on the main screen. Ethan immediately knew this was who Leora had been afraid of. His armor was dark, heavier than the sleek uniforms of the other Atari. His eyes, the same piercing violet as Leora's, held no trace of compassion, only judgment. Leora. The Atari commander's voice was emotionless. You have broken our highest law. Leora's face remained still. There was no other way. Jorah. The name sent a ripple through the room. This was no mere fleet commander. This was Leora's own brother. Ethan's stomach twisted. It had never just been about war. It had been about family. Jorah's expression didn't change. You have brought weakness into our war. You have compromised our survival for the sake of these primitives. His eyes flickered to Ethan. You disappoint me. Ethan stepped forward, fists clenched. If you're here to wipe us out, at least tell us why. You're running from the Voidborn just like we are. You need all the help you can get. Jorah's gaze turned back to Leora. You see, their ignorance proves my point. Leora's jaw tightened. They are stronger than you think. Jorah exhaled, almost like a sigh. Then let them prove it. The transmission cut, and the bombing began. Earth burns. Explosions rocked the planet. In a single coordinated strike, Atari warships launched tactical kinetic rods, weapons designed to hit with the force of small nuclear bombs, but without the radiation. Major military installations in the US, China, Russia, and Europe were obliterated within seconds. Entire cities shook as the shockwaves spread. Fireballs erupted from key defense sectors. Humanity's armies had been crippled before the war even started. Ethan grabbed onto the command table as the ground rumbled beneath his feet. This wasn't war. It was execution. But just as the Atari fleet moved for the final strike, something unexpected happened. The Voidborn arrived. The monsters in the dark. At first, the Atari fleet didn't notice. Their ships were too advanced, their technology too precise. They focused on wiping out humanity, unaware that something had been watching them. Then, without warning, a ripple of darkness tore through space. The first Atari warship vanished. Not destroyed, not exploded, just gone. A pulse of static filled the air as Voidborn vessels materialized out of nothing, their shifting, unnatural shapes distorting reality itself. For the first time in his life, Ethan saw an Atari commander hesitate. Jorah's voice crackled over intercepted transmissions. This isn't possible. There were no readings. The Voidborn didn't wait. Black tendrils lashed out, piercing through Atari ships as if they were made of mist. Energy shields failed instantly. Weapons did nothing. Atari warriors who had spent their entire lives training for battle suddenly realized they were nothing more than prey. Jorah's fleet, once poised to destroy Earth, now desperately tried to escape. Leora turned to Ethan, her expression unreadable. Now you see why I needed you. Ethan's pulse pounded. Because humans didn't run. When faced with impossible odds, humans fought back. And now it was their turn. Project Phoenix activates. Is the fleet ready? The president demanded. A general, his uniform scorched from the earlier attacks, nodded. "We've got what's left. But against the Voidborn." "We don't need to win," Ethan interrupted. His voice was clear, steady. "We just need to survive." Lyora's plan had always been flawed. She wanted humans for their resilience, but she had failed to see the truth. Humans didn't just survive. They adapted. Earth's remaining forces launched immediately. Fighter squadrons streaked into the sky, dodging debris as they locked onto their new target. Not just the Voidborn, but the retreating Atari fleet. Jorah's voice crackled through their comms. "What are you doing?" Ethan leaned into the mic. "You wanted us to prove ourselves. Consider this your answer." Then he gave the order. Earth fired back. The unexpected turn. The first shots hit home. Jorah's fleet, already in chaos, took massive losses as Earth's missiles tore through their ranks. Atari ships, unprepared for this level of human unpredictability, began breaking formation. For the first time in history, an advanced interstellar species was retreating from Earth. But the Voidborn weren't retreating, and Ethan knew they wouldn't stop. Lyora turned to him. "This is just the beginning." Ethan nodded, gripping the edges of the command table. His voice was steady. "Then we better make sure we're ready for the end." The final stand. The dawn of war. The Earth was burning. Skies choked with smoke, cities smoldering, oceans shimmering with the debris of shattered fleets. What had once been a thriving planet was now a battlefield between three forces, each fighting for survival, none willing to back down. But in the vast, empty silence of space, another battle was beginning. Dr. Ethan Cross stood in the command deck of the Dauntless, Earth's last remaining dreadnought-class warship. The holographic display flickered in front of him, projecting the grim reality of their situation. The Atari had fled, their once mighty fleet scattered like frightened animals. The Voidborn had come, black tendrils shifting, moving like an infection, their massive forms devouring the stars themselves. And humanity. Humanity was standing its ground. Ethan's jaw clenched as he surveyed the battlefield. "Give me status reports." A voice crackled through the comms. General Carter, one of Earth's last remaining military strategists, responded from a surviving command center deep beneath the Arctic. "We lost Moscow. Shanghai's evacuation failed. But we managed to hold Fort Solstice, our last orbital defense station." Ethan exhaled. It wasn't enough. Nothing was enough. Lyora stepped beside him, her silver eyes locked onto the Voidborn ships. She had known this day would come. "This is our last chance," she whispered. "If we fail here, it's over." Ethan nodded. "Then we don't fail." He turned to the bridge crew. His voice was calm, but the weight of his words was final. "Prepare for war." The last human fleet. The remnants of Earth's navy gathered, their numbers pitiful compared to the monstrous fleet that surrounded them. 24 battlecruisers, a handful of stealth corvettes, hundreds of fighters, their pilots running on nothing but adrenaline and hope. Against the Voidborn armada, it was a joke. But humanity had always fought impossible battles. Ethan activated the fleet-wide comms. "We are not fighting for victory," he said. "We are fighting for existence." The soldiers of Earth listened, their hands tightening around controls, their breaths sharp and focused. "We are all that's left," Ethan continued. "There is no help coming. No reinforcements. No second chances." He took a breath. "But I don't care if they outnumber us. I don't care if they're stronger." His voice hardened. "We are human, and we do not fall." The fleet roared in response. The first strike. The Voidborn did not hesitate. The sky darkened as they descended, great shadows blotting out the stars. Their forms shifted and twisted. Black monoliths, unnatural things with no clear shape, moving like ghosts. Then, without a sound, they attacked. The first wave struck hard. Earth's defensive platforms lit up, railguns and plasma turrets launching everything they had. Fighters surged forward, missiles screaming through the void. Explosions erupted across the battlefield. But the Voidborn did not die like normal enemies. For every one that fell, another twisted its form, rebuilding itself from the wreckage of destroyed ships. They were consuming the battlefield. Lyora's plan. In the chaos of war, Lyora turned to Ethan. There is one way to stop them. Ethan wiped blood from his brow. I'm listening. Lyora brought up a holographic star map. The Voidborn are not just an army. They are a hive mind. A singular consciousness spread across countless bodies. Ethan frowned. So what? We kill their leader. Lyora's expression darkened. There is no leader. There is only the core. The core, the heart of the Voidborn. The colossal entity buried within their armada, deep in the swirling mass of darkness. Ethan stared at the image, realization dawning. Destroy the core, and we destroy them all. Lyora nodded, but there's a problem. Ethan exhaled sharply. Of course there is. Lyora zoomed into the core's location. It is surrounded by an energy field beyond anything you've seen before. No weapon we have can break through. Ethan's mind raced. Then we use something they don't expect. Lyora's eyes narrowed. What do you have in mind? Ethan turned to his crew. His voice was cold. A suicide run. The final push. The last human flagship, the Dauntless, would dive straight into the Voidborn core. It was the only option. Ethan stood at the helm, his hands gripping the controls. Around him, the bridge crew braced for the impossible. Final coordinates locked. A pilot confirmed. Lyora stepped beside him, her voice barely above a whisper. Ethan, you don't have to do this. Ethan turned to her, a sad smile on his lips. Yes, I do. For too long, humanity had been running. Not anymore. Ethan activated the ship's engines. All units, get clear. Asterisk, 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 we're ending this. The fleet obeyed. Ships veered off, breaking away as the Dauntless surged forward. The Voidborn realized too late what was happening. Dark tendrils lashed out, desperate to stop them. Weapons fired, but the Dauntless kept going, engines burning, shields failing. Ethan's breath was steady. His hands didn't shake. This was what it meant to be human. Then, impact. The aftermath. The explosion shattered the darkness. The core collapsed, a black hole imploding on itself, sucking the Voidborn into nothingness. Across the battlefield, their forces crumbled, their bodies disintegrating, their presence fading into the void. The war was over. But Ethan was gone. Or so they thought. Lyora stood among the ruins, staring at the endless stars. She closed her eyes, her heart heavy with something unfamiliar. Loss. Then, in the silence of space, a single distress beacon flickered to life. Lyora's eyes widened. Ethan Cross was alive. The last decision. The silence after the storm. For the first time in centuries, the void was truly silent. The Voidborn were gone. Their core had been annihilated, their monstrous forms erased from existence. No trace of their twisted empire remained, no echoes of their endless hunger. And yet, as humanity's surviving fleet floated among the wreckage, no one celebrated. The cost of victory was written across the battlefield. Ships burned, their shattered hulls drifting aimlessly through space. Earth itself was scared, its once great cities reduced to smoldering ruins. Millions were dead. Countless more were missing. And at the heart of it all, Ethan Cross was gone. Lyora stood aboard the bridge of an Atari vessel, her silver eyes locked onto the black void beyond the viewing window. She had known many losses in her long life, seen entire worlds die, watched civilizations crumble. But this was different. Because for the first time, she felt something she had never felt before. Guilt. Ethan had given everything, not just for Earth, but for her people as well. He had done what no Atari ever would. He had chosen to fight, even in the face of certain death. And now he was gone. Or so she thought. The signal, a sharp beeping cut through the tense silence of the command deck. The Atari officers turned toward the comms panel, eyes widening. A distress signal. Weak, almost non-existent. But there. Lyra's heart stopped. "Source?" she asked, her voice unusually breathless. The technician's fingers danced across the console. Origin point. The last known coordinates of the Dauntless. Lyra didn't hesitate. Lock onto it. Now. The Atari ship surged forward, cutting through the debris field. The distress beacon flickered in and out, pulsing faintly against the black backdrop of space. And then, they saw it. A single escape pod, barely holding together, drifting aimlessly. Inside, a lone figure. Ethan Cross lives. The medical bay was eerily silent. Ethan's body was broken. Oxygen deprivation, radiation burns, neural damage from the shockwave of the explosion. He should have been dead, but he wasn't. Lyra stood beside the biochamber, her hands tightening into fists. She had seen warriors die. She had watched the strong fall. And yet he had survived. She knew why. Because Ethan Cross was human. And humanity was relentless. The bioscanner beeped. Ethan's eyelids fluttered. His breathing hitched, unsteady but alive. His fingers twitched. Then, his eyes opened. Lyra leaned closer. "Ethan." He blinked once. Then again. His voice was hoarse, barely more than a whisper. "Did we win?" Lyra exhaled sharply, something inside her chest unclenching. She wasn't sure whether to laugh or curse at him. Instead, she whispered, "Yes." For the first time in her long life, she had witnessed something impossible. Not the destruction of an enemy, not the fall of an empire, but the will of a single man standing against the abyss and winning. Ethan's lips curled into a weak smirk. "Told you, we don't fall." Lyra shook her head. "No, you don't." And that's why she had to make a choice. The Atari ultimatum. The battle was over. But the war wasn't. Humanity had survived, but they were crippled. Earth was barely holding together, its people divided between those who wanted to rebuild and those who wanted revenge. Because the Atari, they had fled. Jorah's fleet had vanished into the dark, retreating the moment the Voidborn fell. No apologies, no gratitude, just abandonment. And now, a question loomed over what remained of Earth's leaders. What should be done with the Atari? Lyra had expected the meeting to be tense, but she hadn't expected Ethan to be the one leading it. He shouldn't have been out of bed. His wounds were still fresh, his strength barely returning. But there he stood, at the center of the war room, staring down the last remaining Atari representatives. "Let me get this straight," Ethan said, his voice sharp despite the exhaustion. "You want an alliance." One of the Atari diplomats, a regal-looking woman with golden markings along her skin, nodded. "The Voidborn were our greatest enemy. Now that they are gone, we must rebuild. Together." Ethan scoffed. "Together? You mean like how you abandoned us before the battle even started?" The woman's expression didn't change. "We did what was necessary for our survival." Ethan leaned forward. "So did we." Silence. Lyra watched carefully. She had already made her decision. But this wasn't her choice anymore. It was his. It was humanity's. Finally, Ethan exhaled. "You want a deal? Fine." His eyes darkened. "Here's the price." The last decision. The Atari would answer for their betrayal. Jorah and his officers would stand trial for war crimes. Humanity would no longer be confined to Earth. The Atari would grant them full access to their technology, including interstellar travel. There would be no kings, no empires. If an alliance was to be made, it would be on equal ground, no species above another. The Atari woman stiffened. "You ask for too much." Ethan didn't blink. "Then we'll take it." Another silence. A long one. Then, slowly, the Atari diplomat nodded. "It will be done." Lyra exhaled. The decision had been made. Humanity would not just survive. they would rise. And this time, they wouldn't be pawns in someone else's war. They would be kings. Epilogue. A new era begins. The battle against the Voidborn had ended, but humanity's true journey had only just begun. For the first time, Earth was no longer alone. The stars had opened to them. The first ships launched weeks later, new vessels, built with Atari technology. Their mission was simple: to explore, to expand. And if another war came. Ethan Cross stood at the bridge of the Exodus, Earth's first interstellar warship, staring out at the endless darkness. A small smile crossed his lips. Let them come. Because humanity was ready. The end.